Hello, Toolboxers. Welcome to episode 331. It's going to be an interview of the backlog of recordings I've done from January 2024. This is with Kevin and Gregg, our wonderful colleague and fellow podcaster, Immigration Review Podcast. We go over federal court updates. It's always fun. There's always so much information. And the content, whether it's in January now, other than this whole NTA situation that was updated since then by the Supreme Court, is pretty relevant. And this conversation, as always. Before we start, we have a white labeled I-693 breakdown for clients. If you're doing adjustment of status, the I-693 is the medical checkup. It's something we give a PDF out for clients to be aware of because we've ran into a lot of issues with the panel physicians. So we prep them ahead of time on what they need to ask, what they need to look for, all this kind of stuff. And we've been giving out for years. And I thought, you know what, let's white label that. Means it's just a Word document. The words are all there. The design's there. You just put your firms there and send it out like you guys did it. It's part of our community offerings that we're going to be pushing more and more on the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox private community page on circle.so. If you want to join, you got to be an immigration lawyer, but just contact me, info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com. Again, that's info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com, and join because we're going to have updated a new CLE we just recorded with Joseph Tsang going over it's up. It's gonna be up there in a day or two, but it goes over keeping residency if you're a green card holder, how to, if your green card is expired, you've been outside even for 13 years in one case for him, how to get back in, how to deal with the border, all this really cool stuff. It's free, and it's practical and detailed. It's not one of those generic panels where they say, well, you got to think about research. We like to give me actual examples of stuff we've done, and that's that's how we do the Toolbox. It's really practical, like nitty gritty kind of stuff that you could get real details on. So having said that, the following information is not intended for individual legal guidance. Consult with an immigration attorney and have a good time. See you soon. Hey, everybody. We have the great Kevin Gregg here of Immigration Review Podcast, one of the foremost scholars. And you're literally a scholar with the amount of studying you do. You could say I'm a scholar of this
Wow. I wish my mother listened to your podcast. I'm gonna have to tell her to start looking. I don't think anyone has ever said anything that nice about me. That being said, if you're gonna do it, I go by Kevin the Great is actually better than
That actually
that
sounds
has a
like
better ring to it, if I'm being honest. If we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you read everything and you talk about it, and the level of accuracy, it's like I'm proud to have you on the podcast. It's a big boost for us. So I appreciate coming
Well,
on.
thank
And
you.
yeah, the Immigration Review Podcast, found wherever immigration podcasts can be. So let's jump on. We're going to talk about January 2024 cases. How has the New Year's been in your practice too, and also the cases? I guess fill us up with just personally, like how's business and travel and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. And it's an honor to be here too, John. I like talking to you every month, and I just like talking. I mean, I'm a lawyer, right? And I must say, and it's not just because it's his firm, but like I appreciate it. I get credit. I read all these cases. That's true. But I just read the appellate ones. Ira really does read all the cases. The district court, the
Oh wow.
Okaho, the AO, like the regulations, the proposed regulations. He read the whole 350-page Senate bill, which everybody knew was going to be dead on arrival. The man's nuts. So yes, I do the deep dive into the appellate case law. I must give Ira his due. Not that he needs it in the immigration world, because my God. He really does read everything. He's
Well,
working on the new edition of the book right now, which
it's
just I could have sworn he
yeah.
just published the last one, but
I mean, they're doing it
um
every 2 years, right? Or is that how it works? Every 2 years? The
every two
last one was
years.
two
So
covers.
yeah, it gets published and really the next one needs to be well on the way by the first time.
For
But
sure.
like no, it's not. It's so anyway, but that's the game. I asked Ira early on too, but there is no shortcut. And
Yeah.
it undermines myself because my podcast is a shortcut. So maybe that is a shortcut, I hope. But for me, there hasn't been really a great shortcut other than actually reading them. So doing the podcast really helps me too because
Yeah.
I have to read it.
Like what it does do is like it you allows you to hear it so you know it's there. Like there's this case about like a couple months ago where a US citizen, it was the false come US citizen case. The Ninth Circuit's like it's okay if you get
Yeah.
pulled over, you lie. And like I have that case
Right.
open, but like hearing from
Yeah.
you, I'm like, just remember this case. I'm sure I'm gonna use it in my career at one point. So
Yeah.
just having these in your ear.
I think even Eddie did that one. I think that one was over the summer, and Eddie did that one. Well, one of my partners at the law firm, because I was on vacation. But that right, it's an important one, especially with false claim to citizenship. But
Yeah.
that's exactly the point. And for people who don't know, and I'm always trying to publicize it, not just because it brings people to the curse ban website, but in general, I have every one of these cases bulleted with what I think are the important things. So like I'm going to this multiple times a week to do my own control find research. Exactly. Like you put driver's license or false claim or citizenship,
Hmm.
and you're going to find that case that you just talked about in like 10 seconds. And that is, I've been building that now for 3.5 years alongside the pod. So like, it's a thing.
Gotta
It's designed to help.
you gotta get that into ChatGPT as these new. I want to play with these things. How do you create your own thing and put that
Oh,
part of Toolbox? But
Greg Siskin probably already stole it. It's all open, right? It's probably in his massive humanoid immigration robot.
well, he doesn't. Bet he doesn't have the federal cases you do. So you gotta like create a wall so ChatGPT can't access that information per
Mm,
se, and like and make it non-readable or something if you want to get into it. But that could be a database that's really powerful if you curate it properly.
power to the people and the robots.
And the
That's
robots.
right. 2024 was good. We ended 2023 on a good note. I think I probably talked to you about in January. Had some good wins for long-term clients, and
Mhm.
that's always a good feel. Got to celebrate the wins in immigration
Sure.
because the losses they come. I just got RFE'd on a 601A waiver that's been pending for 3 years. They said they want more evidence, and they got a month. Like, guys, where were you for 3 years?
Yeah.
And by the way, I submitted a bunch, but that's just standard USCIS complaining. I'm not going to get to it. I'm going to comply with them,
Well, two notes
even
on
though it's
that.
been
I've
three
been seeing
years.
people say on Facebook that once they do reply, they approve it immediately, like essentially.
I hope that's right, because if I was USCIS and I had a historic backlog of 601As, I would just RFE everybody, hope that 25% don't respond, and then deny
It's
them. That's
nasty.
a cynical view
Yeah.
if I was
It
USCIS.
what was good during pandemic was the extension, but 30 days to respond, especially when it takes them now the online now is a little bit faster, but it took like a week to get the letter. So by the time it's only 3 weeks at that
Yeah,
point. So
come
at 30
on.
days, it should be changed. That statutory should be changed.
A month, regulatory, I think. A month when it took them 3 years to issue. Come on, guys. But
I'm
whatever,
saying
we're not
like
going
this.
to do
I mean,
this.
yeah, it's because I was gonna say Congress passed a law to change it. But that's crazy. That's not gonna happen. This
Yeah.
they got to go to update the CFR and do the final comments, all that kind of stuff. But it's not fair like at all that the timeline.
That's right. No, but I hope that you're right that an RFE will lead to success for these worthy clients, who I will not name, to all your USCIS listeners. Which brings us then to Espinoza Ochoa v. Garland out of the First Circuit, two from the First Circuit in January. Um, Actually, though, I've got this one as a December 27th case. But it was on a January episode. So if I talked about it last week, I apologize. But it's just such a good one. If I talk about it last one, it's such a good one. I guess it's about particular social groups and nexus. Mr. Espinoza Ochoa he's from Guatemala, and there were cattle thieves. They stole two of his cows, and he was not going to have that. And so we kind of chased them down, and he called the police, and the police arrived, and the police kind of realized that these thieves are probably big time gang people. And even at the police station, the cop's like, "You sure? You sure you want to do this?" And it leads to him having to flee all around Guatemala and eventually to America. And the immigration judge believed him in his asylum case. It's credible, but
Mhm.
found it wasn't, all these death threats and all. It's not on the count of the right reasons. No nexus. It's because, general criminal activity in the form of cattle thievery. But not only that, the attorney defined the particular social group as it involved being at risk because you've reported criminal contact. And so the threat of persecution was in the definition of the particular social group. Maybe not the best thing to do. It's called a circular definition. The board has been chopping those down for years, that a particular social group can't be defined by the harm. It can't, for example, be people at risk of persecution. That's too circular.
Yeah.
But the First Circuit here is saying that is not necessarily true. And this is coming from matter of MEVG itself from the board, which is a seminal particular social group nexus case out of the board. Quote, the shared trait of persecution does not disqualify an otherwise valid social group, end quote. And that's important because immigration judges and I suppose USCIS do often jump to that and say, nope, you've got persecution or the
Yeah.
risk of harm in the title can't be valid. And that's not true. It requires a societal view. Sometimes a risk of persecution can be what makes a group vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um, it could be the catalyst, as the First Circuit puts it. So this case, Espinoza Ochoa, is great. And by the way, it's well established to the First Circuit that landowners can be a valid particular social group
Hmm.
as well. And it doesn't matter that these gang cattle thieves might have been motivated by revenge. The one central reason for asylum, it could also be for the stated reason. Mixed motive cases are valid. This stuff is complicated, is really the point. It requires this nuanced analysis, a look into how a society views a group, quite frankly, and unfortunately, it often requires experts and lots of country condition evidence. But there aren't clear lines, is what the First Circuit's trying to say.
Hmm.
And this was an interesting example on kind of how all of this can play out. So I'll quote from the First Circuit for a bit lengthy, but also it's because it involves victims of domestic violence, which has really been a big argument in immigration for like 30 years,
Hmm.
back and forth, the matter of AB, ARCG, all that. Quote, Salvadoran women who are unable to leave their domestic relationships, that's matter of ARCG, where they have children in common with partners, is a group that appears to be defined in part by the alleged harm. They're unable to leave.
Hmm.
But if those women's inability to leave stems from circumstances independent of the alleged harm, for example, legal constraints on divorce, then the group would not be circular because the inability to leave does not refer to the harm at all. So it's nuanced, it's complicated. The risk of persecution can sometimes be a valid thing to have in a particular social group. That's Espinoza Ochoa. Keep it in
Interesting.
mind.
Yeah.
The First Circuit is always they're always heady and long when they issue non-citizen favorably. It's gotten to the point I feel like I've got a bit of Stockholm syndrome in that sometimes the First Circuit will publish and I'll look at the beginning and it'll be favorable for non-citizen and my advocate in me is like celebrating and then I'll see it's 26 pages long and really complicated. I'm like, oh, sometimes I want that 3-page Eighth Circuit decision
Yeah, I feel
that I
yes.
know is going to be a non-citizen adverse, but at least I'm like, all right, well, 3 pages, and they get to the point quick. No offense to the first.
I hear
Um,
you. I hear you.
and the first publishes in Courier New. They're the only one, and I just do not get it. You learn a lot when you're a circuit watcher. It's a weird. I know a lot of weird things about the circuits that nobody needs to know. I could tell you the time that every circuit historically publishes, the time of the day. Who needs to know that? Um, no comment, right?
No, it's interesting. Like, it's such a niche expertise, but like, it's so niche, but there's a lot of value. I mean, if you stop being an immigration lawyer, you could do consulting on this stuff for the government or for clients,
Yeah,
because of just how we know the system at this point of intense study.
I guess. And then there's been many, I guess, who have done that.
It's me. I was always thinking about side gigs and business opportunities that I've ever
That's
looked
right.
at. But
That's
you're already
right.
doing with the podcast, so it's nice
Add
you're doing
another
that.
layer, add another title to your many titles already.
Well, right now I realize I come with a lot of ideas. I just can't execute. It's too many. So I'm like, I keep needing to bring on a team and people from across the world that can help execute. And then it's like learning how to get out of the way, just give the idea and then have project managers and stuff. So that's like my life right now. And actually, I want to get in the habit of people interested in working with me. Send resumes. Might not hire you now, but it's good to have you in the system. FYI, thanks. You caused me to remember that. I'm going to start doing all my podcasts. 'Cause, I realize hiring a talent is the name of the game. The rest of it could be solved. So it's like, how do
Yeah.
we find a talent from across the world is the most important thing.
I
A
saw
plus
something
talent,
on
yeah.
I saw something on Facebook recently. I think it was who God knows who the quote was, but it said a man who chases two ducks catches none. That- to be focused on one duck. I thought that was just
Yeah,
an
that's
apt
what that's. I
quote.
mean, it's a problem. I mean, I haven't had a problem because essentially I've been doing stuff on the Toolbox a lot because I'm like it's as much as I love it, I'm just two ducks, like everything's gonna fall apart. So this company is
Dude,
like on pause, like I guess sped up where I do stuff and then has to go back up because the law firm is just complex. I'm getting all these new data systems on technology wise, and just studying and figuring out what's going on there. It takes a whole bunch of time of my time. I can't even practice because I'm studying like technology so much. So it's a weird thing. Sorry, it's a completely different topic than what we're here for, but it's just fascinating how there's different levels to this after so many years. I'm back to being a beginner student and starting a law firm
yeah.
now and how to do a system as opposed to a lifestyle kind of law firm that I had originally.
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, it's well somehow it's working out. One thing that happened is last year I could barely sleep because of the baby. And so it just kind of like plateaued my business growth. And at the end of it, I'm like, you know what? I just got to hire out the parts that I usually do, even though I want to do it myself. And so I got all these different vendors now to
Yeah.
do stuff. Our expenses went up, but I'm like, oh, things are happening. That's moving forward. So although expenses went up, like it's just getting me out of the bottleneck of it has been so key. All right, sorry,
Well, no,
pouring
it's
out
good. It's important
my
to know. I
pains.
mean,
Yeah, a lot of people
I
go through this. That's kind of a immigration law's toolbox is always about the education of immigration law, but this is such a important habit part of it, the business that I'm going to talk about more and more, and then bring
yeah,
experts like yourself talking about the law more. It's because
I
it's
could
so fascinating.
I don't know how to run a firm. It's an important thing they don't teach you, but I do know about this next Ninth Circuit case.
Good. Thanks for doing the
Doctor is
I was trying to get you to do the transition because I was failing that. I'm like, okay, I'll pause here. Maybe you can jump and fix it. Thank you.
Alcaraz Rodriguez v. Garland out of the Ninth Circuit, our home circuit. It's about motions to reopen. It's an important one. Miss Alcaraz Rodriguez, she like missed all of these deadlines, missed her asylum filing deadline, just really messing up in all these ways. And you don't
Hmm.
learn until really appeal. It's because she became HIV positive and she was in an abusive relationship. And
Yeah.
like during a filing deadline, if I'm not mistaken, she was actually in the hospital having like an HIV episode and like she left her partner, and so she lost all her HIV drug. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And it gets all the way to the ninth, and so she wants a remand so she can apply for asylum to put forth new evidence. And you know, even though she's missed everything multiple times.
Hmm.
And the Ninth Circuit did, in fact, remand it. And in doing so, they said a lot of good things for non-citizens who might not have such extreme facts. First of all, a non-citizen to the ninth may move to reopen or remand for the purpose of submitting an application for relief, even if the immigration judge did not previously hold a merits hearing on that claim. That's a big deal. Here, the immigration judge denied it, abandoned it, wasn't filed in time, but that doesn't preclude a motion to remand for it. And I like that quote, for example, for in absentia motions to reopen.
Hmm.
Maybe you're from a country where conditions have changed materially. 20 years ago, you were ordered removed in absentia. Here's this good quote to say, yes, I wasn't there, but now I want to apply for asylum. Maybe I have that right with that quote. More
Hmm.
complicated than that, as it always is, but it's a good quote to remember. That's what I do. As to motions to reopen generally, this one also very important to me. Quote, I mean, so before I quote, motions to reopen need to have material and previously unavailable new evidence.
Hmm.
That's standard for motion to reopen generally. Quote, it is not sufficient to deny it that the evidence physically existed in the world at large. Rather, the evidence must be reasonably available to the petitioner. So here, really, all of this evidence about her being HIV positive, about her sexual preferences, all this stuff it did exist in the world, but it arguably wasn't reasonably available for Miss Rodriguez to obtain at the time that she's having this HIV crisis and she's
Yeah.
dealing with domestic violence and she's kicked out of her house and all of that. The availability of evidence at some point prior to the filing deadline does not mean that such evidence is forever available for the purposes of a motion to reopen. It's a nuanced focus, and that's a theme on the cases that I highlight. I try to. I mean, nuance is the attorney's best friend because it
Hmm.
provides argument. These categorical rules are a good way to get smacked down with the circuits, and it provides room for us attorneys to argue. Before I leave Alcaraz Rodriguez, I also like how the Ninth Circuit says that all of this is consistent and actually mandated by the BIA's decision in matter of RCR, which was an abandoned asylum deadline case out of the board during the Trump years, which, as I read it was pretty non-citizen adverse. Like it was a rough decision in my opinion. But here's the ninth saying, actually, that's just a good cause standard BIA decision. If good cause is shown, grant the motion to reopen. And so that reframing or framing of matter of RCR is another important thing
Hmm.
in other circuits where you can't just rely on the Ninth Circuit's precedents.
Yeah.
But, the Ninth Circuit's reading of matter of RCR might be a good thing to quote in the Second Circuit and say, look, the BIA published RCR. Here's what RCR means. It means what the Ninth Circuit says it
Yeah.
means. And here's why we qualify. Because, of course, the BIA is national jurisdiction unless overruled by a circuit. So there's that. And before we conclude, because I like to give you three when I can, is Pineda Maldonado out of the First Circuit as well. Also about cattle thieves. How could I not do two cattle thief cases out of the First Circuit in 1 month? I mean, it's ridiculous. In this case, these cattle thieves said that Mr. Pineda Maldonado's father owed them a debt and a gambling debt. And they threatened to kill Mr. Pineda Maldonado and his brother unless they paid the debt. Um, and so that is the crux of how this all begins. And I could be wrong. I think they pay the debt, or maybe they don't. But either way, they flee. And so here we have another Nexus case involving cattle thieves out of the First Circuit. A lot of other bad stuff happens. There's beatings,
Yeah.
all that. But it's about why did it happen? Again, the board and some circuits, they want to say, look, this is just extortion. This is just criminal stuff. This is not asylum. There's no nexus to a protected ground, particular social group, political opinion, all of that. But here's the First Circuit saying, no, that's not necessarily true. In this case, there's a valid claim on account of his family status. Quote, there's nothing in the record that could explain why the cattle thieves deemed Mr. Pineda Maldonado to be indebted to them apart from their knowledge that he was a member of his father's family. This is a family, this is one central reason appears to be family group. And here's where it really gets me going, because the BIA just issued a decision that could be read as contrary to this, but the First Circuit trumps the BIA, at least in the First Circuit, and that
Yeah.
is, quote, animus towards a protected group, well, to the extent the BIA and some other circuits, well, let me just actually do the better quote. Quote, the asylum statute does not say anything to suggest that animus towards a particular social group is required for an applicant to be eligible for asylum on account of it, end quote.
Hmm.
That is, despite what the BIA recently seems to have said, and other circuits have sometimes said and sometimes not, they don't have to hate the family. They don't have to, saying this is the worst family in the
Yeah.
world, and so we hate your family. No, it's got to be on account of your family membership. And that doesn't necessarily mean a hate for your family here. It could be just because they were targeting him because he was his father's son. And oh, by the way, a death quote, a death threat in the midst of a single act of violence may be enough to establish past persecution, end quote. So this last month, then that's Pineda Maldonado v. Garland. This last month, the First Circuit dropping some asylum bombs in
Yeah.
regards to cattle thieves and nexus and mixed motives.
Well, that's a lot going on there. Uh, it just popped in my head. Like they say, the world's oldest profession is prostitution. I think cattle thievery is one of the oldest thieveries there could be.
It's got to be old. It's got to be old. Although I would think that prostitution probably, I mean, that must have existed before we even
Yeah.
started domesticating animals. But we have gone way far afield of our expertise.
That's my job as the host, just jump around random stuff. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, these are uh, pretty non-citizen friendly kind of cases, especially in this context. They keep
Wow.
trying not to open the door too much or too little, but this is like there's big changes happening. Well, yeah,
Well, that's what I do on your show. I bring the good, but on my show, 2/3 or 3/4 are non-citizen
yeah,
adverse. So if you want the whole picture, you gotta listen to my pod. On your pod, I just bring the good stuff.
yeah. It seems like the immigration system's all happy-go-lucky. It seems for
Yeah,
my
that's
podcast,
right.
but the
That's
real
right.
stuff, check it
That's
out,
right.
Immigration Review, and you got that database on the Kurzban website, which is really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for what you do. So right now it's beginning or essentially we're getting in the middle of February. How's life for the next 30 days for you? You got travels and stuff going on?
Travels, cases. I got a remote individual on Friday. Let's rock and roll.
It's good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, I got to go do a I-751 Nats joint interview tomorrow. I think it should be okay.
Yeah.
It's a close field office. I don't have to drive too far. That's the best part of it. And I like the clients. I haven't met them in person before, so it'll be nice seeing them.
Good luck. You the big
Thanks, bro.
building in LA?
Not the LA. It's like in the valley. It's in Los Angeles, but it's in the valley. And I
Mm.
moved to the valley a couple years back, so it's like a 15-minute drive. I love it. Going to downtown to that one takes me like an hour and a half, both each way. And then you go there and
Oh,
you wait. Like I went there for I-751 waiver, and it took like 2 hours, 3 hours for
yeah.
them to see us. We had a 9 o'clock, didn't get in until 12. That stuff
Yeah.
gets annoying when it's that long.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks again. We'll regroup in a month and see what's going on in February.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Have a good one.